Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over 10 years, we've produced weekly episodes featuring epic tales of tech support and troubleshooting, discussions about managing our clients and businesses, and interviews with colleagues and vendors. For our pro listeners, we offer Patreon-exclusive shows. This private podcast feed is tailor-made for IT professionals looking for advice and guidance on the more challenging aspects of running your practice, working with your clients and employees, and managing your fleets of devices. For a modest monthly contribution, you'll unlock a world of deeper Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a shared passion for Apple technology. Simply visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. And now on to the show. So I've got a PSA, as I sometimes have here. We've had a couple of reports recently from clients who are having trouble either getting mail, like receiving mail sent to them, or they've reported that outside people are getting bounce messages, that kind of thing. And it's all related to DMARC. I think that's the pronunciation. It's all caps, DMARC. Basically, what it does is it allows an email server to verify that the sending email server is allowed to send mail for the domain that the email is coming from. It stands for Domain Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance. Let's say you send a message to a Gmail user, right? And Gmail supports DMARC. So when Gmail is receiving an email for a Gmail user, and that mail says, I'm coming from so-and-so at apple.com, Gmail will say, okay, let me check the DNS record for apple.com, and let me make sure that the IP address of the server that's trying to deliver this message to me is one of the IP addresses that's allowed to send mail for apple.com. That's kind of more recently been implemented more widely, like I'd say in the last year or so, much more than previously had been. And it's a great feature. It used to be that you'd have to tell a client, well, anybody can send mail purporting to be from anybody else. Well, how come, I got an email that says it's from my address. I didn't send this to people. How, I'm getting bounce messages as if I had sent this message. I never sent it. Well, that's because somebody put your name in the from address. Anybody can do that. It's not the case anymore with more and more email service providers. So where this comes into play, where I never really realized that this is going to have these farther-reaching implications, is if you have a hosted email service and you don't use it, but you have an address there, and then you want to just have all the email that's somebody's sending to that service, that hosted email address, forwarded to, say, your Gmail address, and you just reply from Gmail. It used to be you could just do that. You might have an address, client name at clientname.com, that's hosted by, let's say, Kerio. I use Kerio for a lot of email hosting. And you might log into the Kerio admin panel and configure, name at clientname.com to just be forwarded to clientname at gmail.com. And it used to be that would just work. Those messages would just come through. You just respond from Gmail and you're good to go. The other place we've seen this is with your ISP email. You could just send mail. You could configure email, say that it's from any given address, and your internet service provider's mail server will just send it. It doesn't care whatever you say the from address is. It'll just send it.
Yeah, you could spoof Trump at whitehouse.gov and it would work.
Right, exactly. I think it's probably better for the internet that you can't really do that as easily anymore, I guess. But this is tricky now. So if I have a client host, name at clientname.com, but they just have everything going to their Gmail, they just reply from the Gmail. Suddenly they were having this trouble where they're finding that people are saying, you didn't get my email, or that they got a bounce message from Gmail. How can we explain this? So if you look in the bounce message, it's basically explaining this whole thing, but it's kind of technical and people don't really understand it. But they actually bounce the message back with a link to the explanation. And Kerio wrote my client back and explained this to him. And I thought their explanation was pretty good. So they say you have a hosted Kerio email account. The domain is clientname.com. You have a forwarding rule to forward all email addressed to name at clientname.com to client address at gmail.com. Gmail enforces a DMARC policy. Gmail sees the forwarded email as if they were coming from the original sender. So let's say Facebook sends you an email to name at clientname.com, and that's being forwarded to Gmail. Gmail sees that Facebook is sending you mail. Gmail checks to see if Facebook is allowed to send mail from the Kerio email server. And of course, they're not, right? They're only authorized to send mail from whatever, mail.facebook.com, whatever it is. And so Gmail basically then says that, this is a failure of compliance with DMARC because the sending mail server doesn't match or isn't allowed to actually send mail for the sending address. And there's nothing that they can do. That's just the way it is. Now, it seems like there should be an exception that's possible. Like you could say the mail was not originally addressed to clientaddress@gmail.com. It was addressed to name@clientname.com. And clientname.com mail server is forwarding it to Gmail per the user. Can't Gmail see that it's not that it was originally addressed to Gmail, it's that it's being forwarded to Gmail? I mean, there's like a header for that, I think, right? Resent from, something like that. So they say there's nothing they could do. It seems like maybe through an extension of DMARC or something like that, this could be adjustable. But as of now, the only suggestion available is to just use your hosted email account, like actually configure it as a mail account and turn the forwarding off. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Have you ever seen that, Jerry?
I don't think I have.
It's a specific kind of configuration. Like, why would you have an email account, a hosted email account, and have the mail be forwarded somewhere else and not use the hosted email account? But some people just prefer that. Some people say, like, I just use Gmail for everything, and I'm not interested in changing. They just would prefer to do it this way. So it doesn't apply to a lot of people, but it applies pretty broadly to this exact situation, though.
Would your advice be to try to embrace this?
I think as more email service providers implement it, I think it is good for the internet. And in the case, if you're using Gmail, you basically have no choice. They've turned it on. They're now respecting these DMARC rules or policies. And so again, you don't really have a choice. I mean, I guess another option would be you don't use your Gmail account. You find a provider who's not supporting DMARC, who will just say blindly accept any mail sent, from any server. Is that better? I mean, probably not, because I think then you'll find that you're getting more spam, most likely.
Very interesting. So there's been a lot of talk about mesh systems for home Wi-Fi and for business Wi-Fi. And I know that Ubiquiti has moved into this space, and there's a few players that have been out in the marketplace for a while now, one of them being Eero and another one from Netgear called Orbi. So I've had a little bit of experience with the Eero product. Initially, when I purchased my Eero product about a year ago, I had 3 separate identical units that were sent to me in a box. And now if I actually look at what their product line looks like, they have 1 unit, which looks the same as I do, and then 2 smaller satellite units that spread your signal across your area that you need to project your Wi-Fi signal. Most recently, the Eero company came out with a Pro Wi-Fi system, which is supposed to have an extra radio on what they call the backhaul, so that when information is transferred back and forth, you have much more robust communication for sending and receiving. So I've been happy with my Eeros. I haven't used them doing any DHCP. I just put them on my network. I have primarily a Ubiquiti system, one Ubiquiti Wi-Fi access point, and then a Ubiquiti router and Ubiquiti switch. So I put these Eeros in bridge mode, and they kind of work. Sometimes for whatever reason, even though I've applied software updates along the way, my Eeros sometimes cut out, and sometimes I have to jump on the Ubiquiti, and then I go back to the Eero and it's working again. So I really can't figure that out. So I haven't been able to play with a lot of different features, but it looks like it's potentially a really good system for you to deploy maybe in a residential setting, because the clients, it's completely configurable on an iOS device. So it's not like you can even open up a web page that allows you to configure your Eero. It's completely iPhone driven. And I guess it works with Android as well. And you can get them from Amazon and Best Buy and places like that. And I know most recently, Joe, you had some hands-on experience with this brand new Pro Wi-Fi system, which they just released, I think within the last couple of weeks. Now, if I go to their shop, their online shop, I look at what those look like, and those look identical to what I was originally sent. 3 identical looking Eero units, but I guess that they're enhanced now because they have this extra radio. I'm interested. How has your experience been?
Overall, it solved the client's need, so good. It was a little bit of a struggle to set it up. I mean, initially it was very easy. They're very, very simple, but there's a certain wrinkle in the network made this a little bit more difficult to set up initially, especially the first time I've ever set these up. So we'll get into that. These were sort of introduced to me as like the Eero Pro. I think the marketing may have changed a little bit. They do call this the Pro Wi-Fi system. Specifically, that's when you get 3 of these Eero Gen 2s. Each of these units is, I guess they just call it the Eero, and it's the second generation. It has 2 Ethernet ports on the back of each of these units. There's also what they call the Eero beacon. There's a pack of these that comes with 1 main Eero and 1 beacon or 2 beacons. And the Eero second generation, along with 2 beacons, so 3 units, but 2 of them are beacons. They call that the Eero home Wi-Fi system. So I think they're basically not selling the Gen 1 anymore, but I don't think that was clear when they were announcing that this Pro unit would come out. So essentially, they've just replaced Gen 1 with this Gen 2. And they've packaged it as what they call an Eero Pro Wi-Fi system when you get 3 of them in one box. Separate from that, I guess they also have like an authorized reseller program now, and they have a portal that you can log into. So there's also pro.eero.com, and you can log in and you can get access to, initially like a discount on purchasing them for your own evaluation. You can get set up as an authorized reseller and buy them at a discount from their vendors. There's a new sort of relationship with them, which they're calling Pro as well. So it's a little confusing, but I look at them as a drop-in replacement for the Airport Extreme, basically. I mean, the Airport Extreme had additional Ethernet ports, but it didn't have much else going for it. These are just as easy to configure. They're just as sleek looking, compact, and they're just as fast, if not probably a bit faster. I think where these excel is in a sort of wireless mesh network. And again, I'm like you, Jerry, I don't fully understand what exactly that means, but I think it means that basically multiple access points talk to each other, possibly wirelessly, possibly wired. But in a wireless mesh, the backhaul is especially important because the backhaul is how the devices talk to each other. So if you have 2 wireless Eeros, one is connected to your modem and is your router, providing your wireless network. And let's say an additional one is extending your network. Well, the old school way was extended network would basically join the existing wireless network and then create a wireless network. And so actually the extended part of your network could be like half as fast as the main part of your network. But with a true mesh network, the separate radios that the devices use for backhaul allow the network that's part of the extended part of your network. The wireless extended part of your network can be just as fast as the main part of your network, or certainly much faster than the previous extended network methodology.
Sure. So you're not degrading the signal by 50% just because you're using a repeater. They're not really repeaters or true
mesh access points, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're not cheap, right? So the Pro system that you bought was $500 for your client. Mm-hmm. They're saying 3 to 5 bedrooms. Did it in fact cover that much square footage?
They did, yeah. In fact, I only needed 2 at this pretty sizable home. I think it was 3 or 4 bedrooms in this home, and 2 was just fine. We had 1 in the basement, actually, fairly central location, but in the basement, and then 1 that was 1 floor up in the kitchen that was maybe 1 room over from the main one. The benefit, though, in this house was that we have network wiring from that location in the kitchen to the location in the basement. And so the backhaul in this case was actually a wired Ethernet connection between the 2.
Nice.
So we didn't even really need mesh, wireless mesh feature. But we did need the Eero Pro, the actual Eero itself, not the beacon, because the beacon doesn't actually have any Ethernet ports. So it's a wireless only extender.
On the Pro system, in the back of them, there's some sort of a reset button, which is new. I think the one I have had a traditional pin reset. But it looks like there's also a USB-C port. What is that for?
Just for powering the unit, as far as I know. I mean, I haven't explored this more fully, but I'm pretty sure that's all it's for. And I don't know if it was a USB-C or just a micro USB. It's hard to tell.
Although they would be a nice replacement for an airport, you can't hook a drive up to them. That's the downside, unless it was a Ethernet-based drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, because I think that's one of the places that Apple still hasn't really explained yet. They're selling the time capsule. We're still installing them because they do a good job of providing wireless backups or just network backups in general for a home. But Apple has discontinued the airport line, and everybody thinks, okay, Apple's getting out of the wireless access point business. What about the time capsule? There's other vendors that make time machine compatible network drives. I don't know that Apple's partnering with any of them yet.
This mesh, obviously, it's not even an emerging space. It's a space that's out there, and everybody seems to be very excited about it. Everybody's trying to improve upon the technology. This new era that comes out 12 months from now, there will even be a better one, and maybe it will have a USB port on it. We'll accept a time capsule destination.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, so you had some problem, though. Didn't you have to change the LAN addresses, and it didn't work? Or it was really problematic?
Yeah, it was a little tricky. So I got these all set up. They were replacing an older Airport Extreme in the basement, a time capsule that had actually failed that was in a position of extending the network from that point in the kitchen. Pulled those devices out, put in the new Eero in the basement, added the second Eero in the kitchen, got the network all set up. I tested the wireless network throughout the home. Very simple to set up. It actually will help you determine like if this is a good location or not, and to locate that second Eero. Because it was plugged in, it seemed like the location, once I plugged it in, it told me that location was just fine. It does a really good job. It seems like if you were to actually use that second one wirelessly, it would actually test the connection. Does the second unit have a good signal to the first unit, or does it need to tell you basically to reposition it? So that's part of the setup, which is a really nice feature. So I had it all tuned and nice, and it was extending the network, but it was connected over the wired connection, and it was testing great throughout the home. And then I went back to testing the TV remotes. So one of the first things I dealt with was actually troubleshooting the TV remotes that the AV person had set up. And the remote for the Playroom TV would actually like intermittently also control the family room TV. It's not using infrared, at least not locally. It's an iPad, and you select Playroom or you select family room. And when you select Playroom, it's supposed to turn on and off the Playroom TV and control that TV. Well, it was intermittently controlling the family room TV. And so I was testing this all out, and I said, you've got to call this AV person back because I've never used this system and this doesn't make any sense to me. And so I had a lot of this familiarity with these two remotes. I was testing them and everything was working fine at the beginning. So I got the wireless network all set up, and then I went back as a final test. Let me just make sure everything still works, and their TV remotes did not work whatsoever. Press a button and just nothing would happen on screen on the iPad. What's going on? Maybe I have to reboot some equipment because the wireless network went down and came back up with the same SSID and password, but maybe I've got to reboot these devices so they reconnect or something like that. So I go and explore a little bit in the AV cabinet, and I see these two, I guess they're like the remote controller receiver kind of devices. They're basically plugged into the network. So they're not wireless. They're plugged in. So I thought, okay, this is not a wireless thing. I guess the only thing I can think of is they have a manually assigned IP address. And sure enough, I pick up the units and I look at the bottom, and there's a little sticker that says 10.0.1.200 and 10.0.1.201. So I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. The airports were the 10.0.1. whatever, and they have been for probably a decade, right, by default.
Right.
And so, this person set, this AV guy set this up, and that's what he did. And it's been working ever since. I can't fault him for that, but I have no way of changing this now. I mean, he's not reachable. She was complaining that she couldn't get a hold of him anyway for the remote issue.
Wait, an AV guy that you can't get a hold of?
Exactly. What are the odds? Yeah.
It's unheard of.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Exactly.
I was like, really? You can't get a hold of your AV guy? I mean, geez, that's never heard that one before. Better off taking matters in my own hands, despite the fact that I know nothing about these units. And if I have to try and break into the interface or something, I will. But, why don't I just change the schema back to 10.0.1. whatever? So the Eeros had just automatically chosen, maybe this is just the default, 192.168.7.1. That was the address of the main router. I looked into the Eero interface. First of all, it tells you, you've got an update pending. And I said, I'll get to that. I got to figure out this Wi-Fi remote issue first. I dismissed the note about the update, and I just proceeded to try to figure out what the options are. So you can go into your Eero app, and you can tap the little menu button in the top left, and you can go to network settings, and then you can go to advanced settings. You can then choose under DHCP and NAT. By default, it's going to say automatic at the top, and you can choose manual IP. And then it gives you three choices for the IP address prefix. So it starts off with 192.168.0.0. That's one choice. The next choice is 10.0.0.0 or 172.16.0.0. I thought it was interesting that they do specify the third octet there, and it's a 0. So usually you'd have like 192.168.something.0. And so it happened to be, like I said, on 7, 192.168.7.1. So I changed it to 10.0.0.0, but what I really want is 10.0.1.0. And I, with that option selected, I went in and it actually lets you specify all the IP details. So, subnet IP. So I've got 10.0.0.0 selected. I can now type in whatever subnet IP I want. So I tried 10.0.1.0 and then subnet mask 255.255.255.0. I think they call it a Class C subnet.
Class C, Class D, whatever it takes.
Starting IP 10.0.1.20, ending IP 10.0.1.254. The 20 was actually, I think, what they started the subnet at, 192.168.7.20. So I just figured, okay, 20. You want to start at 20, that's fine. Maybe they leave room at the beginning for the Eeros. I don't know. Put that all in, and I went to save it, and it tells me, nope, you've got a problem. Something's not right, I think is what it said. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun. Just double check all the numbers, no luck. Then I think, well, okay, so it wants 10.0.0.0. Maybe I can select that and I can make the subnet IP 10.0.0.0 like it seems to want. And maybe I can change the subnet mask. And this is where I get a little bit outside of my comfort area with networking. But maybe I can use like 255.255.0.0. Maybe I could have used .254.0, something like that. I tried all that, couldn't quite get it to work. And I thought, well, I was thinking outside the box. I wasn't really sure I was doing the right thing. Maybe I'll go back to that. But I said, let me do the updates here and just make sure I'm fully up to date. Maybe they fixed it. I read the details about the update, didn't mention anything to do with IP subnets, but I figured I'll just do it anyway. I had a couple of wrinkles in there because after changing the subnet or trying to change the subnet, like the second unit needed to be power cycled. And at first I didn't realize that. Not able to reconnect to the network. Now I'm getting really confused. So I just power cycled everything, got reconnected with the original subnet.
This sounds like a really fun time right about now.
I'm like 3 hours in or into this appointment at this point. And I'm shaking my fist at the AV guy who I don't know, just kind of like, what? He didn't do anything wrong. I just wish I could get a hold of the guy. It would make my life a little bit easier. There's nobody to blame here. I just haven't had experience with these things yet. On an airport, I could easily change the subnet. I know how to do it. And they let you change the third octet. So, so anyway, it wouldn't be a problem with Eero. This was a little bit weird. The fact that it just seemed like it should have been easier to specify like whatever IP range you want. Also, the thing that annoyed me was like Eeros are probably replacing airports like crazy. Okay, they're advertising across any number of Apple-focused podcasts. They have the Apple aesthetic. They're white. They got these sleek curves. They're about the shape of an Airport Express for that matter. They're probably replacing a lot of old Airport Extremes and Expresses for that matter, which are on a 10.0.1 subnet. I can't be the first person to encounter a manually assigned address on that subnet. That's why they let you change the subnet.
Sure.
Why not have 10.0.1 as an option? Make my life easier. It seems really silly. Anyway, that's the part that frustrated me. Some programmers should have just, realized that like a lot of these things are being changed to this subnet and added this feature. So nonetheless, after updating, I was able to select 10.0.0.0 and then actually just put in whatever I wanted. So it's now set for 10.0.1.0, normal subnet mask, starting IP 10.0.1.20, and ending IP 10.0.1.254. And even though it says, that what I've selected from IP address prefix is 10.0.0.0, it's actually 10.0.1.0. I think listeners have turned this off by now because of the amount of times I've spelled out these numbers. I think I wish there was an easier way to do this. If anybody's not with me, check the show notes. But yeah, that was the wrinkle, but it's not like any fault of Eero other than, like I said, it probably should be one of the default options. That worked. I changed it. I rebooted the equipment and the remotes. It instantly started working. Everybody was happy.
But that sounds like something they need to fix, that if it's reading that you have 10.0.0.1 and you've actually got 10.0.1.0, they got to fix it. That does
seem a little weird. I wasn't sure, I still wasn't quite happy with it, but when it worked, I was like, okay, good enough, I guess. It's best as I know, how to do this. So
does it give you the inclination at some point to get the login credentials for those little boxes that do the controllers?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, for that matter, the client should have it, but you know how that goes. Maybe she does. I don't, for all anybody knows.
An AV guy not providing documentation?
Right.
That
Imagine
sounds
that.
strange. Imagine.
Yeah. It's shocking. I know. Take a minute to let that sink in.
Yeah.
Well, and she had a new Apple TV, and it was like, I don't know, I pressed the Apple TV button, and it's just a black screen. The remote's not working. I'm like, I don't know, maybe we need to use the Apple TV remote for some reason to wake it up or whatever. We tried that. No, I had to go just power cycle it. So not, again, not a fault of the AV guy, but just the Apple TV at one point had just frozen or something. And so I power cycled it. It had an update pending. I did the update. This stuff just degrades if you let it sit there. Somebody needs to be doing managed services for AV at this point. My only other thought on the Eero, I wasn't sure of like how reliable the hardware would be. My only other experience with Eero in the field was that a client had another company set up her wireless network, and they had used the original first generation Eero. She called me to go on site to investigate why her 2 Nest thermostats weren't working. Everything else was working. I walk onto the network, my phone is working, connecting to wireless, Mac is fine. She wasn't complaining about any of her devices, just the 2 Nest thermostats. I rebooted the Nests. I tried turning Wi-Fi off and on. Nothing's working. Now I'm investigating the network. Oh, you've got this new Eero, these Eeros. Who set these up? This other company, blah, blah, blah. Found whatever I could find. It was 2 devices. I unplugged both Eeros, plugged them both back into power, and went over to the Nest. And sure enough, the Nest was already connected. It detected that the wireless network sort of reappeared, and it reconnected successfully, and it was working. I was a little bit cautious, skeptical of the Eeros, but those are the first generation. So maybe Pros will be better. We'll see. And maybe the software is better now. So
through every software update that I've pushed out to them, hoping that my occasional intermittent loss of connectivity, and it's not like the Wi-Fi signal goes away. The Wi-Fi still shows that it's there and it's strong. I just don't have WAN access. A few minutes later, it comes back. It'll happen from time to time. Was this client that you checked out with the Nests, were they doing DHCP on the Eeros?
That's a great question, because that does sound very similar to the issue you just mentioned. And I think that they actually have a router also managed by that other company handling it for her. I do think that the Eeros are in bridge mode. Maybe that's a quirk of being in bridge mode.
We have 2 Nests, and I think they're connected to the Ubiquiti access point with no problems.
Gotcha. Based on this initial experience, I like them. I think I would just recommend it as a pretty much lateral replacement, lateral sort of move from the airport extreme if you don't want to install products that are probably at the end of their lifespan. Maybe they're even better because of this new, extra radio for the backhaul part of the Wi-Fi.
Some of the marketing makes it seem like, and some of the press that I've heard and people talk about the product, like it's just going to blow your toupee off. But it's not, it doesn't do that.
Right.
My toupee is intact.
Wi-Fi. Good. I was wondering.
There's our show.
I was thinking like when you were saying earlier, this Wi-Fi, this mesh network, it's not even like a new trend. Hearing all about it from all these vendors now, everybody wants to jump on board. It just occurs to me it's like the new cloud, when the cloud became a thing. Everybody's talking about cloud services. It's like they've been offering email services for 20 years. What do you mean cloud? Like it's always been a cloud, This is, I guess, something that's been out there. I think people are starting to like now recognize that this is something they want to ask for. They got to get the Wi-Fi mesh. Yeah, everybody's capitalizing on it. Great, good for them. But we'll see if Eero lasts and they're in it for the long haul. One thing you mentioned earlier, Jerry, about the Eero is you set it up from your iPhone app, which I thought was great. I mean, it is a nice workable interface and everything, and it has certain advantages. But then that's the way it's now associated for further management. It's tied to your account that you're signed into when you set it up initially for the client on your Eero iPhone app. With the Pro, I don't know if this is a unique feature of the Pro. I have the ability to transfer the network to the client, and then they will be able to manage it themselves from their device. Is that interesting? Did you try anything with that? I don't know if you've had that experience with clients.
No, I don't even think that's available.
Pretty sure it is a Pro-only feature. So if you are set up as a Pro, you have to like apply to be a reseller or an authorized provider with Eero. Then when you download the Eero app, you can create an account and they recognize that you've got a Pro account. So you go through the whole setup and everything, get it to where you like it, and then you can then transfer. There's under that same little menu in the top left, you can tap Transfer Network, put in the customer's full name, their mobile number, and their email address, and then you transfer. It appears to be a one-way thing. They'll receive the network and have the ability to now manage it, but you no longer have the ability to manage it, unfortunately. And I think that they would need to transfer it back to you to manage in the future. And the trouble with that is, of course, if they're not a pro, there doesn't currently appear to be any way to do it. I think it's half-baked with regards to that. It seems like there should be a way to co-manage it, like for the client. I want a list of my clients in the Eero app, and they also have access to each of their own networks, but obviously nobody else's. And we can both kind of see what's going on.
Very much like the products from Snap AV with the Oversee product that we mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the Wattbox, where you can see all the clients that you manage with their technology.
Exactly. I was thinking of how you described that. That's a nice feature. You could brand it, not to mention for us here, like we have multiple consultants. I mean, I'm not the only one that's going to be managing this one client's network. So we all need to share it, from several different pro accounts. And you can actually invite other techs once you get signed up as a pro authorized reseller. So I can add technicians to my account. It's not clear to me. I don't think that we can both share clients. It's, again, like I said, a little bit half-baked, but I think it's promising, and it definitely seems like a good way to go from basic Airport Extreme if that's been your go-to up until now.
We won't tell your clients, but what's your discount?
I probably can't share whatever the first one was, but I have to say it was a very generous discount. 3-pack you mentioned is like $500. I want to say I probably got...
So you're saying they have an introductory package for you because you sign up to be one of their pros, but then your resale value is roughly 20% markup.
Exactly. And if you buy them as a 3-pack, you get that discount. And they actually sell individually for $199 retail. So, the 3-pack, you're already getting a discount of $100 off of what the price would be for 3 purchased individually. So you can, if you only need 2 at a certain client, you can sell them for probably $199 each. That's what they sell for. Beacons are a little bit less expensive if you don't need the Ethernet on the other side. So you can make a little bit of money on them, just like with the airports. If you buy the airports on Amazon, you sell them for full retail. You make enough money basically to keep them on hand. Is the way I look at it.
Make enough coin for an oil change and maybe a cup of coffee.
Right, that's all we're asking for.
And dry clean your toupee.
Nice. Okay.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it in the pond. Have you tried restarting? Well, my coffee is cold. Have you tried restarting? Well, I'm getting old. Have you tried restarting? I fell off a horse. Have you tried restarting? I'm getting a divorce. Have you tried restarting? Command, control, power. Command, control, power.
Oh, by the way, I got a ticket for using my phone today.
Ooh, that almost happened to me. I had to drop it, and luckily the cop must have not seen me, but he could have seen me.
Yeah. It's because
How much
because
was the
it
ticket?
$1.50.
Oof, that's not
I know.
fun.
And it's because, the stupid beta, I had the earpiece and the earpiece was connecting and then the earpiece stopped connecting and I'm pressing the button and the button's not responding and my client's on the phone and I never called her back and I'm like, Judy, I gotta go.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And so it was my own stupidity. So I pulled over right away and he's like, yeah, how come you weren't using this? And you got a big holder here. How come you weren't using speakerphone? Like,
Oh, man.
so.
Did he notice it was the iOS beta? Would that have been a good excuse? Did you even get into it with it?
No. I mean, yeah.
Oh, because I was using the iOS beta and I pressed the button and do you have a Mac? Do you have a Mac? I could help you with your Mac.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if they would buy any leeway with the cops.
I was just like, I'm like a dummy.